Hello to everybody. This will be a combination of the meeting of students from the high school Subotica. Subotica is a town north of Serbia. They have a jazz high school department since about 10 years ago or something like that. And their professor, my master, she is, so on. On the left side is international press from America, Spain, Russia, Holland, England. Okay. And from left to right, or right to left, whatever. Alex White, drums. Jed Gibbs, Hammond organ. James Carther. All the saxophone, flutes, clarinets. And well, we are so happy that you're guests of 19th edition of Panchevo Jazz Festival. I'm so happy to see you again.
Yeah, it's been quite
in
a while.
Serbia. It's been quite a while. It's almost 10 years, maybe 2006, 2007, something like that.
About 2000.
Yeah.
Okay, about 10 years.
So it is open to ask any questions possible. I would like that we start with students, of course.
Well, I was going to ask, do you suggest for students to transcribe solos often, and what kind of solos did you transcribe when you were younger?
Well, to begin with, I think transcription certainly is a ways and means of dealing with the music in a more intimate setting. But I think the ultimate transcription is when one sits down. I basically sat down and dealt with listening and playing along with radio, various records that were in my parents' possession, and some that I acquired over a period of time when I started going record and tape and mass media hunting, so to speak. And I'm old school in that sense, where I put the needle on the record, just and listened, and of course tried play along with it as best as possible. And then did some transcribing in my formative years as well too. But in looking at various transcriptions, like let's say Lester Young's "Lady Be Good" that he did in 1936 with Joan Smith and Company, which was basically a Basie unit, a smaller Basie unit before it became known. Anyhow, when I looked at the version that I did along with the one that Louis Porter did, with the little squiggly lines to show that he was actually doing like a Morton or a shake on various on the second chorus, where he's this little squiggly line and all that. But there's nothing like seriously putting the horn in your mouth and just trying to emulate that as best as possible, because shaking can be taken like, physically shaking, or, shaking the jib here or whatever, that ultimately it's about what you put in here, because the transcription can be burnt, maligned, or just totally lost. Then where are you? Especially if you hadn't retained it up here, which is where it ultimately needs to go anyway, so that you can recapitulate it in your own way. That's what the ultimate goal is in any type of transcription.
Okay.
I noticed you focus not only on harmony, good melodic lines, but also on color. And the way you approach your instrument is very different from what I am used to hearing. So where did that style come from? How did you develop that personal style of yours?
I'd have to say by not limiting, like I basically play woodwind, so I wouldn't necessarily limit my influences to woodwinds. I have an older brother, his name is James Carther, who used to play with Parliament Funkadelic, and his chief influences were Jimi Hendrix and Carlos Santana and Eddie Hazel from the aforementioned Funkadelic, aggregation. And I just dug how they played, and there's something in electricity. Of course, like when you think of people like, oh gosh, gosh, Eddie Durham, Charlie Christian, Muddy Waters. I mean, those are basically, we call the fathers of electricity. And what they were able to do as far as amplify the black experience, so to speak, through guitar, I took real care in holding on to that and wanting to aspire to that. And thank heavens, a whole lot of it boils down to what your setup is as well too, because some of the things that that I wound up getting to cannot normally be attained by pieces that are normally, you know, sold commercially, like number 5, 6, 7, 8, and all that. I'm actually playing 10s, 11s, and 12s, you know, and but it's a way. I know the numbers sound haunting, like 10, 11, 12 is like a large number, but as far as being able to practice and continuously learn what the limits or what the possibilities are, as opposed to thinking about what the limits are, because once you start thinking of limits, automatically there's like this mental hedge that's put up that you can't go over, this glass ceiling that you can't break through, and that shouldn't be the case. So being able to focus on what the possibilities are is a lot more fortified, you know, than just limiting yourself to, okay, I play alto saxophone, so I should only listen to my predecessors and that be my influence. Because if that was the case, then we wouldn't have Bird, or we wouldn't have even Don Bias or any other flicks with various people playing it. And then the crowning achievement was when my brother's saxophonist actually moved in with us and brought his instruments over. So now I got these instruments in 3D in front of me. So I'd sneak up to what used to be my room where he was staying, and I'd pull out this Selmer Alto in particular, because it was factory gold plated and all that, and I'd make them put it together like I'd see on the album covers, short of the mouthpiece being on. I'd be making them faces and stuff, and I'm looking in the mirror like, ooh, yeah, this is looking sweet, baby, you know. James, where you at? Just put it back and put it up underneath the bed again. So these encounters happened quite a few times, and one day I just became totally oblivious to everybody around me. What? Oh, you know, and so Charles Green was his name. He came upstairs and saw that I had this horn out, and he was, James, put my horn. And he saw that I actually had my fingers in the right spot, and he said, okay, put my horn back. And he watched me put this thousands of dollars of horn back in his case. I took off the neck, put it in a separate compartment, put the end plug on, and put the clamps on, put it back in there, and his cover over it and all that, and closed up the case. And thinking he'd getting ready to go off or whatever, he took me downstairs. I think you're supposed to learn how to play saxophone. So that was the genesis of it right there. Wow. Heard the lead, saw, confessed, and that was it, you know. And of course the saxophone, with the way that I heard it the first time, synonymous with jazz, so it seemed like the first, you know, music to go into upon getting it and stuff. So, but I had to actually go through a Baroque recorder class. That was the Detroit public school way of weeding out individuals that didn't want to play instrumental music at a very cheap price. Because at the time, these Yamaha recorders were only $2.50 a pop. So you basically learned the octave key and the 6 foundation fingers for any woodwind instrument. You think of the flute, you think of the clarinet, you think of the saxophone, the oboe, the bassoon. All of them have these 6 foundation fingers and the octave key, okay? And then, of course, you have your auxiliary keys on that the pinkies are dealing with, and the thumbs as well. So I passed my Baroque recorder class with a ear test where the instrumental teacher, who said I wasn't going to mount me, basically went to, you know, played notes, and we had to pretty much tell him which note was higher than the other, and he played like wide intervals, and some of us would get tired, and the more closer the intervals came, my classmates basically gave up. And I took them all the way down to what I found out later were C and D flat. And I basically passed the class, and then I was instructed to go find a saxophone as a result. And I had to look in the old Trading Times and the classifieds, not eBay and Craigslist and all that stuff. Had to go through, and I found one under $200, and that was the way that I got into it. I still own that horn to this day. It's an old King from the 20s, silver plate that I had for $125.
Who was on that photo picture? Who was in that photo picture that you
Thank you.
On that picture that you look at it, saxophone.
Well, there were quite like Eddie Harris, for example, that album that he has, Playing With Myself, where he's basically, pause. The Playing With Myself actually means that he's playing tenor sax and piano, and he's overdubbing. And he's playing various other, like the frap attachment that would go on that would help him to play more than one interval at a time, the reed trumpet. He was doing all of this. So, but on the front of it, he's holding this Selmer tenor, and he's like, then there's some King Curtis shots where, you know, of course, Memphis doing Grover Washington albums and stuff like that, where he's, you know, so I mean, those are all like, you know, pictorial, like, delights for me.
I tell people this all the time. I think one of the best pieces of advice that JC ever gave me when I first joined this group was to keep these guys open all the time. And by doing that, you allow yourself to look at other possibilities. When I first started playing organ, one of the things that a good friend of mine asked me that I really didn't think about was, how come you don't change the drawbars when you play? You know, you set it, and then it's kind of like where we, from a commercial back in the United States, set it and forget it. You know, you set it, and then that's just the way it is, you know, for the rest of the gig. And I think, you know, JC also said this to me, I think maybe a year or so later after I joined him. He said, man, you got a whole orchestra here, man. You know, and I was, you know, I felt bad because, you know, he was right. He was right. He was right. So to answer your question about what do we do, you know, to play outside the harmonic structure and all of that, you just go there. There's no, you know, what I would recommend to you is don't make it scientific. You know, it's, you just go there. And like just piggybacking on what JC was saying earlier, is just understanding, I wouldn't say either the limits of the instrument, but understanding the possibilities of the instrument. And see, then there's no preconceived notion of what you quote unquote cannot do. What I love so much about music in general is that it's more objective than it is subjective. You know what I mean? Where, you know, there really is no right and wrong answer. Now, don't get me wrong. Now, in all music, you have a form. There is certain rules, if you will. You know, when we play a composition, yes, there are certain changes that, you know, he's going to be looking for, you know, while the melody is being played. But once we've established your two A's, the bridge, you know, the third A section, okay, now it's time to, you know, you use that as a point of departure, and now it's time to go someplace else. I remember, now I know I keep putting JC on blast, but this was very important in terms of my development. We were in Rio de Janeiro for the first time. I went to Rio, and I think it was after the first or second night, and it was just one of them. It was one of those nights, and I will confess in front of the world, you know, it was just not one of my best nights. And yeah, I sucked. And we were on stage, and I see James put his hand, because he knows, he remembers this. And we were doing something, I couldn't hear the note that he wanted to play. He came to the back of the organ, and he just pressed the note that he wanted me to play. And I was like, oh no. So at that moment, you know, I was like, you know what? I don't think this kid is for me. And I'm sharing this with you because this is real. I mean, we're human beings. But I'm bringing this up to say, JC pulled me into the dressing room one day, and he said to me, he said, Gerard, man, all right, but man, I'm just hearing a lot more than what you're playing, you know. And that was just metaphorically his way of saying, come on, man, you know, stop locking yourself, and don't lock me in a box. You know, there's you know, the whole essence of what I do. You know, this is JC talking. The whole essence of what I do is playing free.
Yes.
Playing free.
See, BB King.
He's putting his ears up.
Right there.
So I'm saying all that to say, again, to answer your question, there is no way of how do you get outside the harmonic structure. Just go there. Just go there. You know what I mean? And use these. And again, piggybacking on what he's saying, just don't limit yourself to listening to people who just play your instrument. JC didn't say this, but he said he considers himself a frustrated guitar player. You know, and you know, but that would be my best advice to you. Just don't limit yourself to just your instrument. Listen to vocalists, drummers, vibraphonists, guitars, horn players. Listen to the birds singing. Mm-hmm. Listen to the buses going up and down the street. Listen to the cars. Listen to you know, the commercials that you see on TV. Mm-hmm. Everything emulates and has sound, and you are a sound producer. So, and then the more that you do that, you are just adding more and more arsenal into what you'll be able to present out to the masses.
Oh, really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
As far as going out of the rhythmic concept, I like to do things based off of the triplet. So if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, until you can, you know, you just pretty much open it up. Then you take that triplet, then you play the triplet of that triplet. You take that triplet and play the triplet of that triplet, until you pretty much like get to this point where it's like, okay, I can feel the one and I can feel the tension that this triplet is, you know, creating. Or I even just like count literally. So I'll be in 4 and I'll count 4.5 over 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then so on and so forth until you like find something that you like.
Eventually it's gonna come back.
Yeah, because it's all multiplication. It's all like, you know, if you play 4 bars of 5, you're gonna line back up, you know, within the rhythmic concept of 5/4. So I think just kind of keeping those basic things in mind, and then once you understand that, you can take that and go even further. And one of my favorite drummers for like rhythmic things to check out is Elvin Jones. Elvin is like the master of all polyrhythms, and from there, like the new age. I wouldn't say he's the equivalent because he's a completely different player, but rhythmically, like Eric Harlan is insane.
Yeah, I was here last week.
Great, yeah. And then Chris Dave as well. Those are like my 2 people that I listen to and just like try to pick apart what they're playing, because they have a very interesting, you know, perspective that they approach rhythm from.
From a harmonics perspective, I'm going to do a remix on the Set It and Forget It. Okay, you basically learn, like, let's say it's a standard, for example, like, let's put Body and Soul up there, for example. Of course, you have your basic, straight from the, whatever the musical was that it was basically saved from, because the musical that Body and Soul was born from pretty much died in obscurity, but it was individuals such as Hawkins, and actually, even before the 1939 version of Coleman Hawkins' Body and Soul, there was people such as Chu Berry, even Louis Armstrong actually, and Reinhardt and various cats got a hold of Body and Soul and did their own takes on it. But it just turned out that Coleman Hawkins had the perennial thing that basically came about, and but Body and Soul was being dealt with, you know, even before Hawkins' return to the States. You got to bear in mind that I think one of the reasons why Hawkins gets the ultimate pass and the ultimate, you know, props on Body and Soul is the fact that he had just returned from Europe in anticipation of the Second World War. Folks were like leaving in mass exodus and stuff. And some of our folks wound up getting caught up over there, such as Valida Snow, wound up being a prisoner of war, but because she had an American passport, they, you know, she did go through some uncertain, you know, uneasiness and stuff, but eventually was, you know, deported and wound up being freed and all that, so she didn't meet that, any of them fates. Anywho, but getting back into the meat of the matter, Hawkins was over in Europe for 5 years, from 1934 till summer of 1939. And during that time, a whole lot of people were coming up, you know, basically challenging him on the tenor, such as, you know, before mentioned Shoeberry, Ben Webster, who pretty much got most of Hawkins's old spots. The two of them, between them, they were in Fletcher Henderson's group at different times, and Teddy Hill's group, and eventually like Cab Calloway with Shoeberry. Lester Young, of course, was basically the antithesis of Hawk. So, and in mentioning Lester Young, you're looking at an individual. Lester basically attacked everything from a linear standpoint, whereas Hawkins dealt from a vertical, you know, standpoint as far as his chord progressions were concerned, which was basically how Louis Armstrong was, you know, he was coming out of that book. A whole lot of people were basically in this napkin to this particular day where he spelled out how tonal convergence works and how you can pick any particular tone and just start from there and infuse either diminished, augmented, or minor progressions in there, and still wind up back on the one of whatever it is that you're playing. And he, for like the B section of Body and Soul, for example, he gave me 3 possible examples of how it could be done with different changes, and but they still wound up, you know, correlating with where they wound up on D, wound up on C. I mean, and just the way that you could flip it around. He also did the same thing with me on the A section, the rhythm changes. So instead of boom, 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 I mean, he's and he's up there, and he's just like he's sitting on a cloud. He had his guitar, and he was just and just listening to the possibilities that he was doing. Or I could play this with you, you know. I was like, wow, you know. So that was just homework in a half in and of itself. But listening to it and peeping him out and checking out the differences in how the tune went from Hawkins's version to Train's version, and there of course are various versions in between where you can hear like certain neighboring tones that are being used that get you to that next progression and all that, and just keep an eye open and an ear open for those progressions, you know, certainly helps you go outdoors, you know. And then as a result of you being able to do that, forget it. Yes.
But I was thinking the whole time you were talking that it's amazing, it's ironical how they had such a hard situation in the country and still made such
Bad like
creative
that. Plain and simple. Just think if we were at peace with one another and all that, and we were able to go off on our own, the music probably wouldn't be the same. I mean, there's, and that's a very important chord that you're mentioning there, because of the fact that music and life don't separate. That's one of the biggest, that was the commandment that my teacher gave to me, was that music and life don't separate. And as a result of that, those things inform one another. Like our home situations definitely changed, and as a result of that, it manifests itself in the music, whether it's out of frustration or whether it's out of jubilation, or whatever the situation is. And as a result, we have that much more of not only mileage, but that much more language to talk about, and to be able to play it to the point where we're able to have folks out there have an epiphany or say, dig that, I can understand what you're feeling or whatever. You must have, some people come up and like, yeah, you were kind of frustrated about something. I could tell in what you did here on this particular thing. And I was like, yeah, they can get that, but not know exactly what it is, but they can feel it if they're open.
They're not musicians. Musicians would...
You don't have to be a musician. You have to be within the core of living in life and being a spiritual individual.
Oh, yeah, man. When I listen to it, it's amazing just how you incorporated the old, I mean, you mentioned the old big band saxophone, like Herschel Evans and those guys. I think that's...
What you know about Herschel Evans?
I heard some...
What you know about Herschel Evans?
I know that he's...
You can't drop names and not get pop quizzed on it. What's up?
I know that he's a Coleman Hawkins protege. He has a big sound. Drew Barry, he also has... I mean...
Have you ever heard the term Texas tenor?
Yeah, man. There's a guy that actually has an email, and he's a saxophone Fowler, saxophonist. He calls himself Texas tenor. So that's what I heard. That's
basically, I think he was born in Houston or whatever. But the thing is that Herschel Evans is the original Texas tenor. You should always know that. There were 5 tenor players that basically were the Texas tenor, you know. You're getting there. Hold on, man. Got to put them in chronological order. There's Herschel Evans, there's Bud Johnson, there's Arnett Cobb. No, actually, Herschel Evans, Buddy Tate, Arnett Cobb. Come on. You just mentioned them. Arnett Cobb. No. Chu wasn't born in Texas. Everybody I'm talking about was born in Texas as right now, except for Illinois Jacquet. Illinois was born in Broussard, Louisiana, but he adopted the tone as far as the Texas tenor is concerned. Okay.
So who's the fifth? Who's the fifth?
Oh boy, let's see. Herschel, Buddy, Bud Johnson, Arnett, and Illinois. They're the 5 tenors. Bud Johnson was also, there's the Texas tenor sound is that it's gruff, but at the same time it's a meaty sort of how you do cowboy sort of sound that's just, you know, full of raunch, vim, vigor. And it's very important to mention the Texas tenor sound because of the fact that you have an individual such as Illinois Jacquet, who is the exponent of that, and with Flying Home and various blues that he did 2 years later with Jazz at the Phil, basically cemented the tenor as a wailing instrument, and as a result, it birthed everybody that plays R&B, from Big J to Clarence Clemens and everybody in between. We are the original swag as far as that goes. You know?
I will connect with that Dushan question. You researched the music of Billie Holiday. years ago. So how her music was connected with the life that she had, and how that life provoked that kind of music.
I'd say, I'll be optimistic and let's say that Billie Holiday lived and breathed music. And in her subsequent interviews, she would say that everything she sings about is part of her life. And when you hear even other vocalists talk about how they were able to be around her and how they could see her effect on individuals out in the audience or when they were in the audience, each and every individual felt as if they were actually being sung to personally by her. Even though she's singing for a wide group, everybody could identify to some extent with her. And her chief influences, of course, Louis Armstrong and Bessie Smith. Everybody wants to say, okay, either she's a blues singer or she's a singer or whatever. I feel that Billie Holiday was a musician, strictly because of the fact that when I first listened to her, the first years that I was dealing with was 1936 through 42. And I mention these years because this was a time that she was coupled with Lester Young. And of course, that's like the dynamic duo as far as, and the quintessential horn voice pairing. I mean, they basically wrote the book as far as each one of them finishing each other's sentences, vice versa, having the same tone and having the same insimpatico with each other, One of the first tunes that I actually heard her sing was Mean to Me. And to be able to understand, okay, that here I am like 10, 11 years old, and I'm thinking that Mean to Me actually went the way that she sang, only to find out years later that Prez was basically playing the actual melody. And to hear what Prez did with it, and then to hear her come on the back end of it and take it somewhere else, I mean, it shows you how much innovation and how creative these individuals were. And bear in mind, she barely had like a 2-octave range. But she was able to do all this. Well, she had a little more than 2 octaves, I'll say that, because I think the highest note I've heard her sing was like a high C, maybe even more, but high C and like a low D was probably the lowest note I ever heard her sing, maybe even lower when you consider Lady in Satin by the time 57, 58 came around. But to hear and even with Lester taking liberties on it. But when she comes in and it's the top of the chorus and she's like, each night when you say your phone, I mean, just the inventiveness in that, and taking the melody and just doing the Laffy Taffy pulls with it and stuff, and where it suits her own conveyance, and to know that you had that much freedom, even that back in the 30s, that was just the call in and of itself, it was. And every time I would listen to Billie, there was always a nuance. There was always a different nuance. No matter how many times I hear, her tunes and Vinnie era, there's always a different nuance.
What's that?
Billie Holiday.
Yeah, Vinnie.
Billie.
Always have Vinnie.
I still time on my question.
Oh man, come on with it.
Okay, so basically, it's a question I always find it.
That gets you through the day, or that helps you to let you know that there's something better around the corner, there's prosperity, whatever, there's salvation. That's bad. That's somebody that's lost their subscription to the human race and mankind, as far as I'm concerned. Because even dogs and cats, There was I'm sorry, man. There was a Mysteries and Scandals, this show that used to come on back in early 2000s, late 90s to early 2000s on E! And it was about Judy Garland. And towards the end of Judy Garland's life, there was a guy that was actually sponsoring her that owned a cat. And she used to hang with the cat and stuff, you know, when she was over at his house. There was, right before she passed, she sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow to this cat over the phone. And the cat knew it was her. And supposedly got better. The cat was feeling bad or whatever, and she told her to put the cat up to the phone, and she sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And the cat knew it was her and aligned himself with whatever it was. So if they're able to feel it, and we're supposed to be higher individuals than, you know, these animals, then we have no excuse.
Most of the people are not.
Well, yeah,
You know,
that's the bad stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, I
It's
know,
all the way back around.
I know a piano player from Belgrade that says that the only 1% we're different from animals is just art.
I
Gotta raise it.
have an elaboration. I think any music, I think when music becomes bad is when you're being dishonest. When you don't have like honest intentions behind it. If like, for example, I'm a music producer, and I get people that approach me all the time, and they're like, "Yeah, man, you know, I did so and so song on the radio." For example, there's this rapper named Designer, and like all of his songs sound exactly the same. So it's like, it's cool rhythmically because my favorite rhythm is a triplet. I love triplets, but like after a while you kind of get tired of it. So people, you know, they'll ask, "Hey man, can you make this track that sounds like Designer?" And et cetera, and you know, if you can write some lyrics too, that'd be great. And like I'll actually sit down and try to do it, and I always end up deleting it because it sounds so horrible to me. Because that's not where my heart, that's not where my mind or my spirit is. And it causes a conflict within myself to the point where I'm saying like, man, will I really do anything for money? And so, you know, there's a certain point of honesty that you have to have with yourself if you want to make good music, because what separates you from those that are just doing it for commercial purposes, you know? Like I said, just being honest with yourself and doing something that you're actually passionate about. Yeah.
I'm trying to ask you, all of you, a strange question maybe. How you realize that you're musicians? Because some days the people are growing up and they don't know what to do, how to have a future in the future, and how you realize that you will be a jazz musician. Somebody can influence on you. You buying some jazz records in the store, or you meet some friends and they say, "Oh, let's go to jazz school." Can you explain how you understand that you're a jazz musician?
For me, it happened. I'm sorry, but for me, it happened in a really, really strange way. I actually started playing drums in church, and that's all I knew. Literally, that's all I knew was playing drums in church. And so one day, my cousin who plays cello, she's like, yes, she plays cello. Yep. She's like, Alex, I'm going to work today. You're coming with me because my aunt, her mother, which is my aunt, didn't feel like watching me. So she's like, I don't feel like babysitting, so you have to come into work with me. And she actually worked at the DSO, the Detroit Symphony Orchestra building. And in that building, they had this youth program called the Civic Youth Jazz Ensemble, which, the late, great, God rest his soul, my mentor, Marcus Belgrave, he was the instructor. And I just remember hearing something that I never heard before. And it made me feel so uncomfortable that I actually had to do some research on it. And I'm like, why don't I like it? I hate it. It sounds horrible. Then like I went back and the first thing they had me check out was Kind of Blue, 7 Steps to Heaven, and then on the later side of things they had me check out I can't remember the name of the record, but it was a Pat Metheny record, and it was Grover Washington Jr. And so it was kind of like all of these different eras of, you know, this particular music played with completely different interpretations. And so I told my cousin, I was like, next week I want to go back with you. And so I talked to Marcus, and he's like, yeah, you know what, man, you know, yeah, the concert is about to approach, so you can't play this concert, but you can come and sit in at rehearsal, and et cetera, et cetera. And then the way that I knew that I was meant to play it is at 14, I told myself, you know what, I'm done. I don't want to play music at all anymore. And I had this horrible dream. And basically, like, some drums were just like chasing me. And, you know, like I was running for dear life. And I don't know if you all have experienced this, but when you're having a dream, sometimes you stop and you can't move as fast as you want to. And so like the drums caught up to me and devoured me. And so I wake up and I'm like, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do. I can't run from it. And from that day, you know, so many great things have happened to me, whether it's from meeting like and actually playing with Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock to, it was in a master class, but just that experience like let me know like there is something greater for me to achieve musically. And then, you know, playing at this, then the Lowe's was playing at this one club in Detroit. I'm not gonna say the name of it. And I was just so depressed. And then, you know, I sat in with Gerard at one of his events, and then he said, you know what, we'll be in touch. And like a couple weeks later, him and James show up to Bert's, and James is like, oh, dang, I just said the name of the club. But they show up, and James is like, what's your passport information? You know, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking for a drummer, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Even though James had heard me many times before, and, you know, it takes some maturing to get to a point where someone would consider hiring you, especially of his caliber. Like, it's James Carter. It's not like it's just some basic, you know, person that I'm not gonna go any further, but like the guy is amazing, and he makes the saxophone do things that it's not supposed to do. So it, you know, that's really what makes you know, what lets you know that you want to be a musician is when you're willing to sacrifice comfortability. You know, because I could have easily gotten a job where I, you know, could have easily went into psychology, which is the field that my degree would have been in had I completed it. But because I was so hungry for this, and I was, you know, willing to live uncomfortably for me to pursue my dream, that's how I just knew, like, okay, I can't do anything else because I'll be dishonest with myself, and whatever I do, I just won't be able to give it 100%. So that was...
For me, it was a little bit of the opposite. Well, first of all, I knew that music was what I wanted to pursue when I heard my father play a Richard Groove Holmes album, Living Soul, live at Count Basie's, April 1966. And when I heard this thing, this big electric thing in B3, I was outdone. I was just done, and I knew then that I wanted to pursue music. And because when it gets to a point where, you know, although, you know, when you're a kid, but quite frankly, you know, my parents really didn't really have to beg me to practice. I mean, when it gets to a point where, I didn't want to do homework. I would rather practice. You know what I mean? That's how I kind of knew, you know, like you said, when you're a kid, you're not sure, but when I was, especially, you know, adolescent going into high school, I kind of knew that music was what I wanted to do, but actually my degree, I do actually have a degree. I actually did get a day job. I actually got a degree in architecture from University of Michigan. So yes, you know, I used to do the whole thing. Design, structures, you know, sizing beams and slumps for concrete mixes and all that. I did all of that, but the problem is that I had to be honest with myself. I said to myself, do I see myself 20 years from now still saying, Buildings and Safety Structural Division, Gerard Gibbs speaking. Buildings and Safety Structural Division, Gerard Gibbs speaking. Buildings and Safety Structural Division, Gerard Gibbs speaking. Do I see myself doing that until I'm about 65 years old? And I had to honestly say, you know, no. And so I was the complete opposite. I knew then that I was supposed to be a musician when I knew, I mean, I had a good job. I actually had health benefits. I mean, I was making good money, and plus I was going out on tour as well. So I had a good job. I could leave the job. I could take, you know, unpaid leave, go do the tour, come back. I mean, it was great. But the problem was I wasn't happy. And so I decided to take that step, and on December 1st, 2003, I left a comfortable job with the city of Detroit, and I decided to do music full time, and I have not looked back since. And so I have to agree with what Alex said, you know, you have to be honest. And
thank you, James. Gentlemen, I need to thank those wonderful gentlemen for sharing their emotions and knowledge and musicianship with us. Alex White, drums, he will play tonight at 22. Gerard Gibbs, he will play tonight on B3, and Mr. James Carther, JC on the set. Thank you all very much for being with us, and we'll come.